You're watching Eye on Africa here on France 24. I'm Shona Bhattacharya. Thanks so much for tuning in. Let's take a look at our top stories in this edition. Tens, if not hundreds of thousands of protesters in the streets of Lomé and around Togo, demanding President Faure Gnassingbé give up power after more than 12 years in office. Together, he and his father have led the country for half a century. Take two. Kenya's presidential hopefuls kickstarted their campaigns before an October vote after the Supreme Court canceled last month's election results. We'll be getting the latest from our correspondent on the ground. And a return to normal life. In Central African Republic, a program to disarm rebels gives them a chance to become citizens like any other. This after the UN warned of a possible genocide and humanitarian crisis. Demanding an end to the ruling dynasty in Togo, Amnesty International says 100,000 protesters took to the streets of Lomé, the capital, this Wednesday. They gathered in other cities as well, calling for the departure of President Faure Gnassingbé, who's been in power since 2005. Before him, his father had ruled the country for 38 years. Earlier Wednesday, Togo's cabinet adopted a draft bill to reinsert presidential term limits into the constitution. But for many, it's too little too late. Emmanuel Soji, Raphael Ntale, and Jahina Louison report.
The streets of the Togolese capital were stormed by hundreds of thousands of supporters of the opposition. It was the largest protest in the capital in a decade.
In the 90s, it was the father. Today, we have the son. The population can hardly handle this dynastic succession. We are calling today for Mr. Faure Gnassingbe's departure.
The power struggle between supporters and opponents of the president also focuses on the future of the head of state. Will Faure Gnassingbé, who has been in power for 12 years, be allowed to run for president again in 2020? The draft bill adopted yesterday in the Council of Ministers on Constitutional Reforms does not mention whether the two-term limit will be retroactive.
Parliament's review of the draft bill on constitutional reforms is coming too late.
A genuine showdown has been on for a week in the country between opponents and supporters of the President Faure Gnassingbé.
The president is a citizen like any other. He has the right to be a candidate. The law does not prevent him from doing so. If we believe that he is the best candidate for us, nothing can stop him from being candidate in 2020.
The presidential party has the majority in parliament, so the vote should just be a formality.
Kenya's second presidential campaign season got underway this Wednesday. Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga have until October 17th to rally voters to their cause. This time around, the Electoral Commission will be different. However, 6 officials have been appointed to run the new vote after Kenya's Supreme Court ordered a do-over of last month's election. Julia Steers is following the story from Nairobi. Julia, Raila Odinga had asked for the change to the makeup of the IEBC, Kenya's Electoral Commission. Is he satisfied with this decision?
Well, so far his party has said that they are not yet satisfied. And remember, directly after the Supreme Court decision came down last Friday, Odinga called for the entire committee to be disbanded. He called them criminals. He said that it should be disbanded and they should be prosecuted. Of course, the Electoral Commission's chairman did acknowledge that a reshuffle was necessary and would be handled as we saw today. He's appointed these new officials. But interestingly, today, it was not only Odinga who is not fully satisfied. A spokesman for President Kenyatta's Jubilee Party also sent a letter to the Electoral Commission saying that they are now not satisfied specifically with these officials who they say are partisan. They say that they are political appointees in reaction to the opposition's demands that new people be appointed. So now it seems that the Electoral Commission cannot make either side happy. The Electoral Commission responded this evening by saying that they are reconstituting the organization in order to make sure sure that an election is credible, that they have heard the complaints of both sides and they have factored those in, but they stand by their new appointees.
Now, what can we expect from the campaign this time around? Will it be a replica of the one that we saw just weeks ago?
Well, of course, the biggest change will be that it's just the two presidential candidates and their running mates. The election that we had just about a month ago, of course, involved MPs, senators, governors. So all of those will remain in place. And this is just a runoff of the two main presidential candidates. But in terms of their content on the campaign trail, we can expect to see much of the same. While the official campaign started today and will go until October 15th, really both of the candidates were seemingly campaigning directly after the Supreme Court decision was handed down. They were speaking in their strongholds. They were both saying that they feel fully confident that if it is a fair election, that they will win the popular vote. And they really seem to be heading into this guns blazing. They're not really showing any signs of fatigue, but rather it's sort of reinvigorated, particularly the opposition, to get back out on the campaign trail and to make sure that they win the rerun on October 17th.
Julia Steers, thank you so much for reporting live there from Nairobi. Official results are finally in regarding Angola's general election. The ruling MPLA party won 61.07% of the vote, and UNITA, the main opposition, took 26.67%. On September 21st, João Lorenzo is expected to be sworn in, replacing José Eduardo dos Santos, who's been at the head of the country for the past 38 years. Taking steps to lower tensions, Central African Republic has launched a trial program to disarm rebel groups. Ex-rebel fighters have given their weapons to the UN MINUSCA force in exchange for a return to civilian life, and the program is meant to help them in their transition out of a life of violence. An important step and a chance to bring back stability to a country where dozens of people are killed on a weekly basis. Pierre Akpro, Eduardo Dropsy and Emmanuel Landé report.
These former rebel fighters are starting a new chapter. After years spent in the battlefield, they're finally able to start a new life as simple civilians. It's disarmament day for these majority Muslim Seleka rebels who overthrew power in 2013 and plunged the country into violent unrest. At the Demobilization, Disarmament and Reintegration Pilot Project headquarters, first things first, collecting all the weapons from the former fighters. Some of the ex-rebels, like Golfi, will enter the ranks of a new Central African National Army. He'll be reunited with his former enemies, Christian-majority anti-Balaka militiamen. But today, he says, he's ready to move on.
They're also disarming. From now on, there is a time for everything. They are my brothers. They are Central Africans. Why fight again? All we want is work and for the state to call on us. We want to serve our nation, that's all.
Despite disarmament and reconciliation, the security situation in Central African Republic has only worsened since the start of the year. Last month, the UN warned of the possibility of genocide. For Colonel Noel Sellison, who's overseeing the DDR operation, the hardest challenge is yet to come, ending the proliferation of weapons in the country.
We are going to set up a national commission to fight against small arms and light caliber weapons. And it's this commission that will have the time to train people on the borders, internally against the proliferation of weapons.
Outside the relative calm of the capital, Bangui, 2/3 of the country are still overrun by armed groups that are beyond the control of the state.
And that's the end of this edition. Do stay tuned. There's more news coming up on France 24. Do stay with us.